Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Diverts in the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for continued support. And remember, click the subscribe button, everybody. This is a fantastic episode because aboard the mothership is Jim Zub and Ray Fawkes. They're the co-creators of Murderworld from Marvel comic books. Now prepare to traverse the stars. Hello, Mr. Zub and Mr. Fawkes. Thank you so much for coming to the Diverts in the Stars podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. It's a pleasure.
Totally my pleasure. We're going to get to talk about some Marvel today. Very exciting.
We are pumped. Lots of good stuff in the pipeline. I hope you're reading lots of good books.
Oh, most certainly am. Some Marvel. Actually, recently, I've been reading more Marvel now than DC. Like Moon Knight is absolutely fantastic. Thor is absolutely really fantastic. Good. You know, they're doing a lot of good stuff now.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great books coming out. It's been an amazing time. I think it's been a pretty good year overall, just for the industry in general.
I will say the announcement of CrossGen being reissued, I'm very excited about it. I'm kind of crossing my fingers that this becomes a thing. So if you know anyone at Marvel who's in charge of that kind of stuff, tell them CrossGen needs to finish the CrossGen stories from 20 years ago first.
I do not have any kind of thing I can offer on that front. I'm not even sure who's the editor on that stuff. So, yeah.
I have no idea.
I do appreciate hearing it. That's cool. I hope that stuff gets out there as well.
Indeed. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comics and who were your earliest influence for both of you?
You go first, Ray.
Me? What inspired my love for comics? Well, I mean, I was reading comics when I was a little kid. I just, the stories, the heroes, the colors, you know, all that stuff from right when I was little. But what made me want to get into comics, it was mostly stuff like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing and when Frank Miller was doing like Elektra Assassin and Daredevil and that stuff, you kind of put those three together in a bit of a stew and you get kind of the stuff that started me off the launch pad.
It is great when you hear certain names repeated a lot. I mean, Miller, you hear a lot of people love Miller. Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, you get a lot of people hitting on. That's when you know you've done something, right? When everyone refers to you as their inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
How about you, Mr. Zub?
I mean, I grew up, you know, really obsessed with at first kind of the Marvel comics canon. Like my brother and I, we were collecting tons and tons of Marvel stuff. We loved the official handbook of the Marvel Universe back in the day because we couldn't afford those back issues. There weren't the kind of, you know, digital archives and trade paperbacks that you have now. So that became our like encyclopedia. Like it was this knowledge base of how all this stuff connected together and why it all mattered. And so because you couldn't afford to buy those back issues, you would just read those little entries and imagine how deep the history went and how far back it went. So I was obsessed with Spider-Man, the Avengers, Fantastic Four. My brother was buying all the mutant titles. So Uncanny X-Men at first, and then eventually, you know, X-Factor and New Mutants and all that stuff as well. And so we kind of split the Marvel Universe as much as we could and just bought as much as we could. Over time, I would sort of move over to stuff more like what, you know, Ray was talking about. I loved the Vertigo titles, you know, Sandman, eventually Preacher. Those kind of books really blew my mind. They seemed really innovative and amazing. And also manga as well. I was, you know, pretty early on when manga was making its way over here, you know, in a bigger and bigger way. Epic was reprinting Akira, and I had seen the movie and it blew my mind, and I wanted to keep reading the manga there. But all kinds of other ones, everything from romantic comedies to like, you know, samurai stories to sports manga, just seeing the depth and breadth of what was possible there. I've just been obsessed with all kinds of different comics over the years, just dozens and dozens of different things, whatever I can get my hands on.
Are you surprised that manga has almost overtaken comic books over the last 5-6 years?
I think I don't know about surprised. Like, I think it makes sense because of the depth and breadth of what's released over there. Like the sheer amount of material that's coming out, you can cull it down to really high quality stuff that hits a lot of different audiences and a lot of different tastes in that regard. You've got historical dramas, you've got romantic comedies, you've got sports stories. You know, these are the kinds of things that have not been served in North American comics consistently for quite some time. And so you can see that it appeals to this kind of broader base. And then you also have hard-hitting kind of action, adventure, and everything else in that stead. It's also a little bit easier to collect. The stuff is, you just follow one series usually through, or one creator. The interconnected worlds of things like Marvel and DC are very kind of unique in that regard, and our ability to all kind of play in that sandbox, but it's not something that is propagated over to other kind of comics culture broader. Everyone now kind of looks more at Marvel and DC as this global kind of thing, even though it emerges from North America. Yeah.
So one thing that's really cool is that both of you are co-writers of Murderworld, or the upcoming Murderworld. So how did the partnership first occur, and how does this collaboration actually work?
That is a good question. Do you want to explain how far back this rolls, Ray? Because it's pretty unique.
Well, Jim and I have known each other for like 25, closing in on 30 years. And
says it out loud, and it's like, oh my God.
Back in the day, when we both knew we wanted to get into this business, but we were, just kind of starting out, a lot less experienced than we are now. Jim kind of came across an opportunity to pitch something to Marvel, and we sat down and batted a couple ideas back and forth. And one of the ideas we had was for this Murderworld story, which at the time didn't go anywhere. And we kind of put it away. And this was just a case of the time was right. Jim called me up a few months ago and was like, hey, what do you think about reworking that Murderworld idea? And I'm like, that idea from like 17 years ago? And he was like, yeah. And we did it. We saw that there was actually some good potential in there, some good stuff. And culturally, the time did seem really right, and pitched it. And that was one of the fastest green lights I've ever got on a project, I think.
Oh, wow.
Except it took 17 years for us.
The fastest and the slowest green light we've ever gotten. That's right. Yeah. What Ray was saying, so I was working this is 2004. I'm working at the Udon studio. At the time, Udon's doing all sorts of artwork for Marvel. So they were doing a series called Agent X. They were doing Sentinel and a bunch of other stuff. They were coloring on a bunch of series. And I was doing other artwork and project management at the Udon studio. And so through that, we knew, we had Marvel contacts. I really wanted to be a writer. Ray and I have known each other for years, and we'd always been, chatting about our story ideas and things. And you're trying to come up with something that's not being used with a character currently with their own series. We were like, that kind of that game show aesthetic was so fun. And the mixture of the kind of kookiness and the violence are so interesting, and what you could do with it. And one of the things that has happened over the years is that, and this kind of ties into our broader sort of pitch, is, Arcade's always coming up against these superheroes. And by the very nature of the comic, if he's up against Spider-Man, Spider-Man's going to win. If he's up against the X-Men are going to win. You know what I mean? We're like, and yet this guy Arcade's really dangerous. He's really deadly. How do you show that? How do you really show how powerful and capable he is? We've got to create a story where he can kill people off, where we can do really cool stuff with him. And this was the sort of idea that we spun out of, is this, kind of really deadly game show sort of concept of Murderworld. Pitched it up the ladder to Marvel. And the response was a very polite kind of, this is cool and all. Who are these people? What are their credits? And we're like, well, we don't really have very many. The fact we were even able to kind of pitch at that level at Marvel was a little bit ridiculous. And so we were kind of, not a bad idea, not a bad pitch, didn't make us look bad, but we also didn't have any traction. And so, many years later, Ray's done a ton of stuff at DC. I've done a lot of work at Marvel. We've got a horde of credits under our belt. And I have been working on the new Thunderbolt series. And the pitching process on that went really, really well. And we had all sorts of fun kind of collaborative ideas that I was doing with editorial. And just an offhanded comment, they were like, oh, that's one of the best pitches we've seen in a while. If you've got any other things in the, in your pocket, feel free to let us know. And feel free. And I think C.B. Cebulski actually said, he was like, if you've got a Squid Game or something. And I said, well, Marvel does have a Squid Game. And he's like, what? I said, Marvel's got a Squid Game. It's called Murderworld. And he goes, yeah, but like, how would you actually do it? And I said, oh, have I got the pitch for you? And so I was able to take this old pitch, look at it now with much clearer eyes and a much more experience, and kind of go, no, the bones of this thing still function. but we're much better writers now than we were, God, 18 years ago. And so able to look at this thing and improve upon it and strengthen it and really drive it all the way through. But the germ of the idea, and I think some of the big payoffs are very much the same as that original pitch, which honestly, it's like now my ultimate example of never say never. You know what I mean? We're talking this pitch is old enough to vote. Like it's an oldie, but it's still good. There's something really strong and visceral there. And it's like, if I'd have just barked off and said, oh yeah, I had this pitch idea, and told everyone my idea, it would have just sort of faded off into obscurity. But we kind of held it there and kept it in the archives, and eventually it has its day. It's kind of wild to
It's funny too, because the pitch did kind of grow into its own. I think when we originally wrote it, it was a lot more like sci-fi. Some of the things that we had happening in Murderworld and the way Murderworld operated was sort of like a little bit speculative, but now actually the technology exists for a lot of the things we're talking about. We have things like the deep web and live broadcasting on the internet, streaming and stuff like that. So yeah, it turned out to be like a pitch that kind of was almost a little too ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I feel like not only that, but the just the way we look at media in society and the way we view, entertainment, I feel like has gone through quite an upheaval, as well. And it just seems that much more relevant. Absolutely.
What's funny? I get the feeling 90% of my listeners are now running to wherever they used to have their old stories online somewhere, and they're like looking them up going, there's got to be a piece of gold in here somewhere.
Never throw anything away. Never throw anything away.
It's true that you never know what's going to, finally hit. And over the years, I've scavenged ideas from other pitches that didn't go anywhere, or a particular character or a title or a name. Like having those scrapbooks of ideas is always useful. There's always value there. Get your ideas down and then, let them percolate, and you never know.
So how does this collaboration work between the two of you on a story? Do you guys handle different parts of a story? What do you guys do about inevitable egos that may pop in? We're like, we all feel our ideas are always the best ones. How does this all work out?
How would you want to describe it?
Yeah, well, we synergize pretty well as far as throwing ideas back and forth. We're pretty good at just, setting our egos aside and saying, how's this story going to work? And then we throw stuff out there, and some stuff gets dismissed or thrown out, obviously. But we generally start, we started the whole project, and we start every chapter with a pretty big, long conversation. And then once we've both sort of hammered out everything we want to see, it goes to one of us to, sometimes one, sometimes the other, to write an outline, and then we both look it over. And then we've been trading the scripts. So like one of us will write an issue, and then the other one will go and do like a dialogue pass or whatever. And then in the next issue, the other one will first write the draft, and then the second, so we trade back and forth. And it's actually a pretty simple, it helps that we've been friends for so long. We kind of know each other's.
And we've done co-writing with other people over the years as well. So I think we've kind of learned to give, if this was the first time we'd ever co-written with anyone, I think there would be more tug of war. But we've done co-writing projects with other different people before. This is just our first time collaborating together. And so you get used to, like, comics as a whole are a collaborative process. I think people get the wrong idea that the writer is whatever in charge of the story. It's like, no, the artist has such a huge role to play anyways, and editorial is going to have their feedback and processes, and we're used to that because we've been doing this stuff for years now. And so it's just a matter of saying, look, in any one of these meetings, you're trying to justify a particular plot point or a character turn because it's going to serve the story well. And so if I can enthusiastically explain to you why I think we should do this, either you're going along with it or you're coming back with, I think here's a better version of it. And then we kind of, because I think we have pretty similar tastes in terms of that entertainment quality, it's like, yeah, that is actually a better turn. Both of our names are going to be on it. Both of us have contributed in huge ways. I'm not worried about winning every single point. That's not really what this is all about as collaboration in general, or this project in particular.
I'm curious.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm curious to see how this one goes. I mean, obviously, we've both collaborated with a lot of people, and I think Jim knows. With the audience, it tends to be the people who are already your fans will think you wrote all the parts they like.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I'm actually curious when this comes out, who's going to come up to the table at conventions and congratulate me on something Jim wrote or congratulate Jim on something I wrote.
I mean, that happened with me where, I was doing Avengers No Road Home and Avengers No Surrender, and I was co-writing with Mark Waid and Al Ewing, and they're both amazing, and they were great collaborators. We had a ton of fun, but there are those moments where someone comes over and goes, "Oh, I know, that's a Zub scene," and I'm laughing because I'm like, "No, Al wrote that," and they're like, "Really?" You're like, "Yeah, or vice versa, where a lot of the big metaphysical stuff at the end of No Road Home, they're like, "That is such an Al Ewing, up to bat cosmic level," and I'm like, I came up with that actually, so it's this fun thing where you can sort of surprise people because they can't quite typecast you. They suddenly realize maybe you've got a little more going on there than they anticipated. Which is fun.
So you guys are not gonna take credit if someone comes up to you and congratulates you on a part that's not yours, gonna be like, "Yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome." That's by right. Me.
all me, baby. No, I think we're both pretty good about that sort of stuff. Like one of the things that has been fun, I think both of us, sometimes we're egging each other on. I know a couple of times we've gone on a call and we go, "Man, this part's really vicious," and then Ray will be like, "Yeah, we could do this even nastier," thinking that I'm going to talk him out of it. And I'm like, "No, go further, make it more brutal, make it more vicious. Go for the gusto." Yeah.
So, was there any characters that you guys fought over, including in the story, or taken out of the story?
I can't say because they sort of appear anyways. We literally talked about this today. I don't want to reveal. I don't want to. There's so many surprises in the story, and there's so many how the hell or why the hell did you do that that I don't want to tip my hand on that too much.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is a question that's going to be really fun to answer when the book is done.
Yes.
And people are going to say, "I can't believe we put these guys in there," and we can be like, "Well, you should have seen how we were originally going."
Well, like I said, I know the ones that were announced. We had Black Widow announced, Moon Knight, Wolverine, Spider-Man, the Avengers, but I'm not sure which members are definitely taking part. So I don't know if any winks or nods to any of those.
There's a lot of fun, cameos and appearances that I think are going to really surprise people. Who the characters are, the way the characters appear, and what ends up ultimately becoming of them. I also think there's a lot of great nods to old Murderworld stories and little in-jokes and tips of our hat to, the shoulders that we stand on in terms of these classic stories and a lot of the fun thematic stuff that has come out over the years. Most notably, like Claremont, who obviously, created Arcade and Murderworld. Originally, the first appearance of Arcade is in a Marvel team-up story, not even X-Men. I don't know if people know that, but he shows up in a Marvel team-up story. It's Spider-Man and Captain Britain. And it's a great one. It's really, really fun. So yeah.
I think my knowledge of Arcade originally comes from the Super Nintendo video game. I think it's Arcade. I think it's Arcade and the Spider-Man and the X-Men. I still remember. I don't think I ever beat the game. I think I got too frustrated by it and quit. But I do remember loving playing it for a while anyway. So obviously, as we mentioned, Arcade is the primary villain of Murderworld of the series.
Yes.
So what is the key to understanding Arcade, and how is he seen differently through the eyes of the different heroes that he's going to come up against?
The key to understanding Arcade. How did we put it? Jim, do you remember?
For me, well, I think that sort of tying back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, that Arcade has always been a loser in the sense we've never been able to show him be as lethal as what Murderworld has promised. You know what I mean? That because we put him up against these superheroes, but superheroes are not his only targets. And then we get to show, I think, the full depth and breadth of what Murderworld has done or has been capable of over the years in ways that the reader hasn't seen before. Let's put it that way.
And I think one of the things that we said when we were first putting this together is that Arcade is actually a man who is incredibly dangerous, just not so dangerous to superheroes.
Right.
So most of the superheroes write him off. They're like, oh, that guy, he's a joke. But meanwhile, he has the capacity, he has the resources and the ability to harm and kill a lot of people.
And resources is one of the things that we kind of play into, is the idea of how kind of globally connected it is in ways that I don't think has ever been quite shown before, and ways that he's able to monetize his particular skills. And yeah, that's sort of all I can say on that front.
So
yeah,
from the summary that I read, it said that Murderworld is no longer like this legend. It's something that's online and people now know about it. So that awareness, how does that raise the stakes of the story? And is the greater danger the fear that's going to generate, or what it implies about Arcade's new boldness, knowing that he's must know something that he's willing to go out there now and basically announce himself worldwide?
There's definitely a boldness that makes him much worse now than ever before. The idea that he runs this theme park and people die there, and there are people all around the world who want to watch this and they want to pay, right? So Arcade is changing into something kind of very, very profitable and very sick. He's presenting a whole new kind of problem to a lot of the heroes who are going to face him.
Yeah, and the public facing nature of it is sadistic in all sorts of different ways, because it's no longer just about, you know, the contest itself. It's about even the footage that he's able to acquire. It's the situations he's able to create, and the kind of PR spin in a weird way that he's able to generate from it in a sick and kind of twisted way that I think we're really excited to explore little bits and pieces of as well.
One interesting thing about the series and how it's being presented to the reader, it's 5 connected one-shot stories instead of being called a 5-issue miniseries. So how does it being delivered as 5 one-shot issues change how you're narrating it, or change the experience of the reader who's going to enjoy it?
Well, there is one sort of greater story being told, but each issue is going to be narrated by a different character.
Yes.
So we get kind of 5 perspectives on this one story involving Arcade at its center.
And the story is moving forward. We're not just telling the same events from different points of view. The story is continuous, but our POV is changing each time. Yeah.
I'll say personally, I'm very curious to see the point of view of Moon Knight. That sounds fascinating.
Oh boy. The Moon Knight issue might be my favorite in some way. Yeah, it's yep, that's all I could say until you read it. I did the first draft script on the Moon Knight one, and I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. So, and our editor Sarah Brunstad, she was also really, really pleased with how it all sort of spins out, even though, you know, in the outline we said it's going to go like this. When you see it actually executed out, I think we amped it up suitably. I don't know how else to say. I don't want to give anything away. It is nuts. It is nuts. There's a lot of fun kind of anarchistic moments that we've been able to unleash in this series. And a lot of times where I've said to Ray, and he said to me, like, put it on the page. Let's see if we can get approvals rather than not go for it. Like, we don't try and self-edit. Let's let them tell us no rather than not do it, you know. Yeah, which has been nice.
So according to the summary that I read, who is Paul Pastor? Is he investigating Murderworld? Is he brave or incredibly foolish?
Why not both?
Yeah. Why not both? He's young.
He is young.
And well, Paul has heard about the rumors about Murderworld. He's seen footage of Murderworld, and Paul is maybe an aspiring online journalist or show host, and he is investigating Murderworld, and he gets an opportunity to go there and participate.
Yeah, see it firsthand. And
willingly?
What? Yes. I'll just stretch that out a little. Sure. Let's say
a qualified yes.
A qualified Mostly, yes. Yeah, he's a really fun character because he's your classic kind of touchstone character. You know, even if if a reader for whatever reason has never heard of Arcade or knows anything about Murderworld, through his eyes, you get that baseline bit of information and you start to understand the depth and breadth and how your average person would see the machinations of someone like Arcade, which I think is really important, because we're always used to seeing like a superhero gets thrown in a death trap and Arcade's cackling and they're going to fight their way out. And that's cool. It's been a lot of fun, and the visuals and the big bombastic kind of circus style craziness. And if you sort of dial that back and you go, what is your average man on the street kind of perspective of this madness? Like, what is this all about? And why would anyone ever, you know, want to get close to this sort of thing? And then we kind of pull back the veil and cool stuff starts to get revealed. So,
but of course, Paul has a secret ace up his sleeve. So
yes,
you know,
that's what I love about every character in the story has got a good secret, has got a reveal, has got something else going on. So you get introduced, or you see how they're entering into the contest, or you see how they've been pulled into it against their will. And then there's always a fun little card turn. There's always a fun little extra bit that we're able to keep you hopefully on board for all five, because you don't know how it's all going to turn out. And the twists and turns at every issue are some of the things I'm most proud of, that I think we're going to be keeping readers guessing right up until the final scene.
So. Now, I don't know if you can answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because, you know, what the hell?
Sure.
So as we said before, there's Moon Knight, there's Spider-Man, Wolverine, Avengers, Black Widow, whatnot. Is there a connection to these characters, or is it random that they are chosen by Arcade?
Question.
That is a good question.
There is a connection, yes, for most of them. And Arcade is a guy who's used to getting what he wants, except when he's dealing with superheroes.
Right.
So he's
purposefully not, you know, Wolverine kind of being the exception. He's not going after, you know, people that we've typically seen in, he's not using all the kinds of things we've seen before. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? It's not just same old at Murderworld. Yeah.
Well, he is a showman. He's never going to want to show you the same thing twice.
That's right.
So how does this series fit into current continuity of Marvel?
It's perfectly plugged into current. We reference Krakoa in at least one issue. We referenced his recent appearance in Black Widow, where he messed with her, all that stuff. It is lockstep in the current Marvel universe, though you don't have to have read those stories in order to appreciate what's going on.
But it is definitely taking place like right here, right now, in the midst of the Marvel universe. Yeah.
Yeah, this isn't an Elseworld story or anything like that. It's not you know, we're not faking anyone out. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Well, thinking about the stakes, are we potentially looking at deaths?
Sorry, we're not faking anyone out that way. I mean, it's Murderworld. There's all sorts of different ways that we can fake you out, and mysteries and secrets. But we're not doing like we're going to kill every character in the Marvel universe and then go, never mind, it's you know, Earth 716 or something. Like, that's not what we're doing. Let's put it that way.
So like when we talk about stakes, are some of these superheroes in actual danger from a reader standpoint? Like, are we looking at some characters not going to make it through?
We're looking at some characters not going to make it through.
Everybody in Murderworld is in deadly danger.
Yes.
Okay, very cool. Very exciting. So because they said 5 one-shots, so can a reader pick up one shot and understand the story, or is it sort of like a miniseries where you need to follow through on all 5 to totally get what happened?
It's best if you were to read all 5.
Yeah, you're going to get the most out of all 5. There is a recap-ish kind of mechanism built in, but it's built to be read in order, and you'll get the most out of it. And the last one ties up a bunch of plot threads, so you can't pick up part 5 and go, okay, satisfying story. Like, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, it's built as a continuous carrying you through trials and tribulations of the contestants of Murderworld
and of Arcade.
And of Arcade, that's right. The trials and tribulations of Arcade, absolutely.
So when can our listeners find Murderworld?
Do you know when it's coming out, Jim?
Good question. I can pull up the solicit for Avengers. Hold on a second. For the in-store date. I believe, oh geez, right on the cusp. Now, of course. In stores November 16th for Murderworld Avengers. Yeah,
very cool.
We are super duper pumped. And then December is Spider-Man. So that'll mean January is Wolverine.
Yeah.
February is Moon Knight. And then March will be it's called Murderworld Game Over.
That sounds absolutely. Will they be regular issue size, the one shots, or are they going to be extra size?
Regular.
I think they're regular size. Yeah.
Well, I can definitely tell you sold at least one reader so far. So I want to thank you guys so much for talking with me. Murderworld sounds absolutely awesome. So, Mr.
Thank you very much.